Good morning. How's everybody doing? Good? Awesome. So before I get started, just a question, a show of hands. How many people here have been to a yoga class? Wow, that's that's the answer I was looking for. So just to kind of fill it out, how many people in the room have seen a picture of somebody doing yoga on Instagram? That's better. Also me. That's better. So just so that we're clear, everybody can either have a mental image of themselves practicing yoga or at the very least a mental image of somebody doing yoga on a beach. Good? Cool. So one of the first things I did as I was starting to prepare this talk is think about the word flow. And so as one does, I looked it up and I was presented with a dilemma. You see, flow can operate as either a verb or a noun, and they both have a range of options to choose from. And so the big thing for me was I thought I would have a handle on this, right? Like I knew what the word flow meant. It means flow. It's one of those words you know the definition to. You don't think about it too often, but in thinking about all of the ways that it could present itself, you don't consider all of the ways that you can use it until you have to speak in front of 150 people. And you decide to get Google involved. So I decided not to use one single definition. Hi. My name is Justin Timothy Temple. I practice, teach, and know absolutely nothing about yoga. You see, this experience of encountering something that you think you know but have no idea about is not uncommon to me in my daily practice. I have learned that when I do think I have a handle on something, when I do think I understand something, quite often I know nothing about it. And so I can't talk about yoga without talking about the Yoga Sutras. They are a text written by the sage Patanjali. He lived in about the 2nd to 4th centuries. We're a little unclear about the timing. And it's a treatise on how to best achieve yoga, which is, a whole thing in and of itself. But when you get into it, the definition of yoga exists in verse 2 out of 196, which is really nice if you're looking for what yoga is because you don't really have to read very far to get to it. So I was in a band in my early 20s. I should bring that up. And so as one does when they're in a band, you invest a lot of yourself, emotionally, financially, personally into this endeavor. So much so, in fact, that in the years passing after we broke up, as one also does when you're in a band, my therapist at the time said I was devoting so much energy into identifying myself with this thing that I was creating my own suffering because I wasn't allowing myself to be myself. So the Sanskrit verse for yoga is yoga chitta vritta nirodha, which roughly translates to yoga is the stilling of the fluctuations of the mind. That is to say that when we do our practice on a consistent basis and we start to refine this skill, it allows us a greater opportunity to sit with ourselves. And when we sit with ourselves, that's how we really come to know ourselves. So why the mats, the weird shapes, the kombucha? So much kombucha. So a lot of kombucha. So the sutras tell us the best way to still the fluctuations of the mind is by practicing stilling the fluctuations of the mind. And I just want to take a minute to say that I love that definition so much because it is such a thing that could be snarky if you really wanted it to be, right? I have a question. How do I do this thing? And the answer is just practice the thing. If it isn't obvious, I'm a Capricorn. The poses are just a mean to practice that stillness, right? So yoga, as I practice it, is through a method called vinyasa. And vinyasa is a really straightforward thing. If you inhale, do a thing. If you exhale, do another thing. And when you get to a pose, stay there for a while and breathe. You can define it in a multitude of ways as well. It can be the linking of breath and movement or how we move into and out of a posture or the ritual or methodological approach to an entire practice. I'll just stick with the first one because you guys have jobs to get to. So As you apply that framework to moving and finding stillness in a practice and you're taking those breaths, it's challenging in physical work. But the physicality of it is a trick. What you're actually practicing is the act of concentration. What you're trying to do is pay attention to your breath. And in paying attention to your breath, when you're in that pose, you're really paying attention to your breath because you can't go anywhere. And for those people that said that they come to my class, they will tell you it's a very long 5 breaths. Very long 5 breaths. But if you do start to refine that skill, you can't begin to succumb to those mental fluctuations because your attention is held, right? You're breathing and you're paying attention to yourself and starting to understand your patterns, your habits, who you really are. So I took my first yoga class after that whole band thing. In 2008, 2009, the timing's a little unclear. Friends of mine wanted to try out a yoga class, and I was in a room when they asked a group of people, and I said, sure, why not? Then next week we were practicing hot yoga, and then we started going the next week and the week after that. I'm being a little bit generous. They didn't come back the next week. For some reason I did, though. And it would take another 4 years before I would find the practice of Ashtanga yoga. That 4 years between my first class and my first practice, I was working a 9-to-5 job at a defense contracting firm, which I hated. I was freelancing in the evenings as well, which I also didn't particularly care for all that much at the time. And so between both of those things, I settled into what I now recognize as burnout, and it was a quite efficient thing. I came into an Ashtanga practice by chance. Again, another invitation from a friend. And again, once I started, I didn't look back. I really found what I was looking for. So practicing Ashtanga is hard. Really, really, really hard. But not because the poses can be hard, and they can be. But what's really challenging about it is, after a while, at a certain point, you're confronted with all of your patterns and habits because you keep coming back to the same place every single day. There's no experience like getting a mirror held up to you at 6:30 in the morning. She'll tell you. So what I mean by that is, in Ashtanga, the method is you practice every single day, early in the morning, because why not make everything about it a challenge? And when you practice, you keep doing poses until you get a pose that you can't get to, and then you stop and go home until tomorrow. And so what that is essentially a chance to fail every single morning. And you do this by choice. That's a joke, right? What it actually is a ritual, a chance to show up for yourself daily. Devote your time to understanding who you really are. And so when we're practicing postures, working to find stillness in those postures that we fail at, you have to decide how to approach them, right? Eventually, the body opens up a little bit. The mind opens up a little bit. You find a way through steadiness, awareness, dedication that you can eventually accomplish something that felt impossible yesterday. In between that time, you become very aware when your mind tries to tell you to bail on a posture because it becomes too hard. Sometimes your mind will tell you not to get out of bed in the morning and just skip practice altogether. Often, you will try to just force yourself into a pose just to get it, right? What you learn through both ends of that spectrum is that neither end, neither apathy nor aggression, serves you, and more often does more harm than good. I've observed whatever occurs on a yoga mat occurs off of it. So in becoming aware of our behavioral and emotional patterns, habits in a controlled setting, i.e. practice, right? We create the opportunity for us to notice it in our lives in general. Not necessarily to change who we are, but just to notice and have agency over our decisions so that we can strategize and choose who we truly want to be. After my first year of practice, I quit that 9 to 5. I quit freelancing too for a time, but got bills and all, right? I started to learn that I didn't have to accept things that I truly didn't need, right? I took a different 9 to 5, again, bills. But this time it was an art director, coincidentally at the yoga studio that I was teaching at. Go figure. I only began to have opportunities like these because I allowed myself to not believe the stories that I told myself, and that I can walk through doors when they're open for me. Just like getting up for a practice is a choice, so is taking opportunities when they're in front of you. So I continue to practice daily because the discipline is nice. Again, I'm a Capricorn. But really, somewhere along the line, the discipline turned to devotion. I practice yoga as a ritual, a communion with myself. Teaching is a direct extension of that devotion. I don't want to hoard information that I gain through my direct experience, but rather give it all away in an effort so people can have their own unique experience, so that I can hold up a mirror for somebody as one has been held up for me countless times. So I've been teaching for 7 or 8 years, probably closer to 7, practicing for a little over 10. I work and practice alongside a group of individuals who show up daily for themselves, who use the practice in a way to support their work in social justice, public health, academia, public policy, mental health, their entire family, right? A whole myriad of ways that are creating tremendous direct impact for so many people. That is to say, those people are truly the amazing ones in the room, not me. They are the people that are using the practice and having a willingness to return every single day to show up, to make bigger change for the people that are outside of themselves, to be able to show up for others in their own unique individual way. And so maybe in that, I do know something about yoga. And it's that when you show up for yourself and you practice in earnest, it allows you not only the opportunity to show up for yourself and see the humanity in yourself, but also to show up and see the humanity in others. Thank you very much. Wait, one other question. Who's coming to practice tomorrow? Thank you, guys.
Oh, I love it.
Sit.
We're going to open it up for some questions, but I'll start. Oh, let's sit on the couch. Let me get the mic, too. Many things.
It's cozy.
Yeah, sit on this cozy couch. It's available for sale.
Wait, this couch is for sale?
I know. Did I put down?
Tell me more.
Y'all, I'm just like a mess right now. I'm putting down clickers, putting down.
That was me. Where'd you put it?
Oh, haha, found it. I want to hear more about this band.
God.
Tell me about it. I think we have a picture.
Look. Like I didn't email that to you. So, like, what do you? So the story of how that came to be is actually pretty funny. So, like I said, it was in my early 20s, so I might have been at a party. And then me and the lead singer of the band had mutual friends. So in running in the same circle of friends, we got to be friendly, and we, in talking, realized we had the same taste in music. After a while, there was one particular party where they said to me, and you know, parties being what they are, none of us were speaking with any sort of reasoned logic. Don't drink, kids. But he said, you know, if you ever played an instrument, I would totally ask you to be in a band. And I was like, if I played an instrument, I would totally be in your band. And for whatever reason, that just stuck in my head. So the next morning, I was very sleepy, but I got out of bed, and I drugged myself to a music store, and I bought a bass and an amp. And I started just getting on the internet and fumbling with it. And after about a week, I was like, dude, I bought a guitar and an amp. Can I join your band? And he was like, what? I was like, yeah. He's like, well, why don't you come over? Me and the drummer are practicing. And so I went, and it went about as disastrous as one could imagine. But I finagled enough coherency to write down chord progressions of whatever songs they were kind of playing, and I practiced every single day. And I played my first show a month after that.
Wow. Wow,
Yeah.
wow.
And then it just kind of took off from there.
I love it.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have some questions? I have a microphone for you.
Well, I have a question. I don't think I need the microphone.
Go ahead,
My
Betsy.
question is, after that description of what you just said about going and buying the bass and everything, now then you were talking in your talk about going through the doors that were open and knowing you could go through them. What changed? Was it fear as you got older of failing?
I think so. I mean, when I was 20, I had a lot less to lose, right? Like, I was in school. I'm not operating from a perspective of, it was very much like LOL, nothing matters, right? So it's like, let me drop out of college, let me join a band, let me buy a van and live in it and tour around with 3 other stinky dudes and like think this is like a great life choice, right? Because it could be, right? Like there's not so much intrinsically tied to that. But then you get older and like when that fails, like it sets a neurological pathway, at least for me, to think that like, okay, well, that risk really, really didn't work out so well for me. And like I'm very, like at that point, still very attached to that. So it's like that informs my decision making for like anything else that could possibly be a risk. And so what wound up happening for me a lot was just either avoiding or self-sabotage. Again, my therapist is probably talking through me in that one, right? But like I did everything I could for a number of years to not either take advantage of an opportunity that was in front of me or when something, not even an opportunity, but like when something profound or life-changing, even in the most minor of ways would present itself, I would do anything I could to just find an escape, right? Because it's totally a thing. Trauma's a thing, and that was a trauma for me, so. I think that's where kind of that divide happened. And just learning that taking opportunity isn't something that can be wholly scary, and if you're preparing yourself to receive it, then you'll be ready for it when it shows up, even if you don't think you are. There was a really good thing that I read actually a while ago on this news website called The Outline, and I forget who wrote it, and I wish I didn't because I'd love to quote them for this. But they said that we commonly as people are never ready for when we get the things we need. Right? So I kind of stick with that.
Who else has a question?
Do they have yoga for children, for kids?
Yes, they do. It does exist. Yeah. Jess teaches it. So everybody, if you come up to Jess right there, she will teach your kids yoga. But a multitude of studios do it. I think there's YouTube videos for it I've seen. That you can just plop in front of a kid and they'll just start doing it and start repeating it to you when they're not in front of that YouTube screen. It's quite endearing.
Does it have the same impact that it does with adults?
Oh, I'm sure. Like yeah, so like from that perspective, I'm pretty sure. The only academically backed studies that I've ever seen with yoga and children has been more slanted towards middle and high school kids. Just because that's where my, I guess, nerdy interest lies in like what the impact for youth of that age is. And there is definitely a tremendous amount of positive benefit there. So I can't imagine that there wouldn't be for kids that skew even younger.
I have a question.
Oh. Yeah.
So yes, you talked about the power of practice. That's dope. I like it. So even the ways that maybe you could suggest practical ways in addition to yoga, not yogi, of this practice of kind of showing up for yourself every day. Like, that's a very
Yeah.
So, like what are practical ways that you could do that or start practicing that?
Yeah. I love that question. It's really good. So I think a really practical way you could do it, and like maybe this is like super touchy feely, right? But like when you wake up in the morning to brush your teeth and you get in front of the mirror before you put the toothbrush in, just say thank you, right? Just thank yourself for small things. Ingratiate yourself for the mundane or the banal things that you do every single day, and that can be a ritual, right? Yoga is like so high level, and there's so much like privilege that comes along with being able to practice in the way we do, right? The financial impact, the able-bodiedness that comes with it, right? And I don't want to ever suggest that it is the only way to achieve a certain goal, because like one, I don't know if it's the only way to achieve a certain goal. It just happens to be the one that I found that works for me. Excuse me, getting over a cold. But I think that through that context, we can do similar things, right? So like having a gratitude practice or just sitting and breathing for, thank you,
Yeah.
sitting
To do
for
that earlier.
sitting for a couple minutes, and not even sitting with the intention of removing thought, but just sitting because you're carving out a space for yourself without any obligation to anything else but you. And you know, if you can sit and breathe for even just a little bit, I think that that is just as impactful as getting on a mat and practicing for 90 minutes, really, at the end of the day. Because you're cultivating the time with yourself, and that's all that we're trying to do, and that's the most important aspect of it, I think.
Natasha, can we turn up the house lights a little bit? Thank you. I think Taylor did. Yeah.
As someone that's that's taken risks and started new things, do you ever have imposter syndrome, and how do you deal with it?
Yes. Yes. I mean, like, even to this day, right? Like, and that's a pattern and a habit. And, like, it's never, I don't want to say, I don't want this talk to come across as if I have somehow magically gotten past all of that, because I haven't. Like, I was talking to a friend on Monday, and they were asking me about my talk, and one of the things that slipped out of my mouth was, I was like, I don't even know why they asked me to do this. Like, and it just naturally happened, right? Like, and those are easy things to like kind of fall back into, because they're pattern, they're just something that's there. But I noticed that it happened, right? And that's all that we're trying to do through practice, is like not so much be on autopilot, but when something that is a habitual thing surfaces, we can say, oh, there it is. And like, we can understand that, like, all right, I can do something about that. I know why this came up, and I can reframe my relationship to that thing in, if not in real time, at least I can process around it a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, imposter syndrome's real. But also another thing that I read that is, I don't know, maybe this is an arrogant statement, but like, and I'm going to paraphrase a quote, but imposter syndrome never happens to anybody that's doing the right things. Right?
We have time for one more question. Yes.
So I understand that in the metaphorical, like life way, you never run out of challenges. But after 8 years of, or 10 years instead of practicing, I can't imagine that you're still running into, or I couldn't run. I don't know. But did you ever run out of things that you couldn't do anymore to do the next?
Yes. So here's the quick rundown on Ashtanga. If you think about poses in a sequence, right? Ashtanga, it's bookended. So there's practices you do in the beginning, practices you do at the poses you do at the end. Those never change. What happens in the middle are what are called the series. And so each series has 35 to 40 poses that you practice over a given period of time. And that's what follows kind of that framework of you practice until you fail, and then you come back tomorrow. In Ashtanga, there's 6. I'm currently learning the 3rd, and it's been 10 years, right? So typically, it takes about 3 to 5 years to learn one series. Really, it takes about 2 years to learn a series. It takes about 3 to 5 to like understand a series. So like I'm still technically in a process of starting to kind of understand the first one. I've learned the second. I understand it a little bit, maybe enough to like tell people to stop doing that. And now I'm just learning the third. So I too fail every single morning, and I probably will for the rest of my life.
Wow. Well, we're going to try something new right now. I have one more question for you. Totally just like taking from the podcast Code Switch. I want to ask
Which
you.
I love. Everybody should listen to that podcast. It's great.
Plugs all around today. I want to ask you what song is giving you life right now?
Oh, that's a good question. Like this wasn't staged. So there's this compilation album that I came across recently. It is a compilation of Nigerian, Zimbabwean, Zambian garage rock from the 90s, which is like totally out of left field, but like I don't know, it's just really great. But the title track off of it is called Can't You Hear Me? And it's the best song right now for me. I just love it.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kira.
Thank you for everything.
No,
Let's hear it again for Justin.
Thank you, guys.